Jasmine Crockett exposes. Judge Amy Coney Barrett. Secret deal, the room goes silent. Instantly. Justice Barrett, are you prepared to answer for the deal you made behind closed doors? The voice of Representative Jasmine Crockett cut through the Senate chamber like a blade sharp, cold, and unrelenting. The packed hearing room fell into stunned silence. Cameras clicked into overdrive. Barrett blinked only once, her polished composure shaken for the first time that morning. The air thickened. Everyone knew this wasn't going to be an ordinary oversight hearing. Crockett stood firm in a tailored crimson blazer that defied the room's oak-paneled decorum. She didn't just walk into that chamber to ask polite questions. She walked in to expose, and she came armed with receipts. "We're not here to play confirmation charades, ma'am," Crockett continued. "We're here because the American people demand answers." Justice Amy Coney Barrett, sitting behind her mahogany shield of authority, stared straight ahead, but her fingers gripped the table edge like it might fly away. Behind her, a row of aides traded panicked glances. Crockett reached into her leather folder, black, sleek, battle-worn. "Let's start with this," she said, holding up a printed email. Dated September 18th, 2020, 3 days before your nomination was announced. Two administration officials discussing a mutual understanding with ACB. That's you, right? Barrett tried to answer, but Crockett didn't let her. "It gets better. Next up, a calendar entry, private meeting, you, them, same timeline. Then this." A new document. The room gasped. "A memo," Crockett declared. "Written by someone inside the administration. 3 pages detailing your private views on cases you weren't even supposed to know were coming. Commitments, alignments, guarantees." The committee chair lifted his gavel. Crockett ignored him. "Don't you dare call this speculative," she hissed, eyes locked on Barrett. "You signed judicial ethics agreements. You swore an oath. If even half of what's in this memo is true, your robe means nothing." Barrett raised a hand. "These documents are authenticated. Twice over," Crockett shot back. "Digital forensics, metadata, time-stamped, verified. Don't play dumb, Justice. It doesn't look good on you." Barrett's face hardened. Crockett stepped forward. "Oh, and let's not forget the kicker," she said, placing one final document on the projector. The chamber screens flickered, then displayed a handwritten note. Gasps. The handwriting was unmistakable. "That's yours," Crockett said flatly. "Right." Barrett leaned in slowly. The silence was louder than any gavel. One by one, senators craned their necks. Crockett wasn't done. "Your note says, and I quote, 'Maintain confidentiality on points 1 through 3. Now you tell this committee what those points were." Barrett looked down. Jasmine Crockett leaned into her mic voice, steady as fire. "If you can't remember, Justice, I'm happy to remind you. Or better yet, let the American people decide." The chairman slammed his gavel once. "Representative Crockett, you will allow the witness to respond." Crockett didn't flinch. "She's had 3 years to respond, Mr. Chairman. Today she answers." Justice Barrett sat motionless for a beat too long. Then finally she spoke. "The handwriting appears to be mine," she said, her voice restrained. "But this note lacks context." Crockett leaned in fire behind her calm. "Context you want, context, here it is. You met with 2 administration officials during a crucial week, just before being nominated to the most powerful bench in America, and somehow you conveniently forgot." Barrett held firm. "I never made commitments on any case." "You just made promises without paperwork," Crockett shot back. "Because if that's your defense, I've got a bridge to sell in Brooklyn." The crowd behind the cameras erupted. Reporters exchanged glances. A journalist from the Hill whispered, "She came loaded." Crockett paced slowly like a predator drawing out the kill. She pulled up another slide. "Metadata shows this memo wasn't drafted in 2020, Justice. It was created last month. Care to explain?" Barrett blinked. Crockett didn't stop. "You want to invoke judicial ethics now. When the evidence in front of us smells like a backroom deal, From a political mafia, you weren't picked for jurisprudence. You were picked for compliance. Senator Cruz interjected. Point of order, Mr. Chairman. This is character assassination. Spare me the theatrics, Senator, Crockett said without turning. You weaponize Benghazi hearings for ratings. This is called accountability. The chairman tried again. Representative Crockett, I have the floor, she snapped, and I'm not finished. She turned back to Barrett. Justice, one last question before we bring in the witness. On the day in question, when this supposed meeting occurred, where were you? Barrett opened her mouth, closed it, then quietly, Notre Dame, giving a lecture. Crockett nodded. Right. And was that lecture recorded? Yes. Crockett turned to the projection team. Play it. Gasps. A video clip began. Barrett on stage in a lecture hall time-stamped. Crowd visible. Applause. Her voice echoing about the Constitution. You weren't in Washington, Crockett said, slicing through the tension. You were here, talking about originalism while the so-called meeting happened without you. So either your calendar has teleportation, or this entire memo is a farce. Barrett said nothing. So which is it, Justice A, forged record, a ghost meeting, or something worse, complicity in a cover-up you didn't orchestrate but also didn't stop? The room was dead silent. Jasmine Crockett walked back to the table, took a breath, and tapped her papers. I've requested FBI forensics to trace the origin of the memo and the so-called whistleblower. She pulled out one last folder. Turns out they never worked for the DOJ. Just a low-level analyst with a grudge and connections to a pass with one goal, discredit this court before the next election cycle. Barrett exhaled slowly. Her image on the big screen looked pale. Crockett finished the round. This isn't about one justice. It's about the integrity of our entire judiciary. And the American people, they're not buying robes and rituals anymore. They want transparency. They want truth. And they're not afraid of tearing down illusions to get it. The hearing adjourned for a recess. But the storm had only just begun. 15 minutes later, the chamber doors swung open again. Justice Barrett returned, flanked by legal counsel, but her posture was changed. The measured grace was still there, but now it was tight-coiled, controlled. She sat. Microphones adjusted. The room adjusted. Chairman cleared his throat. Justice Barrett has requested to address the committee. Crockett folded her arms. Barrett leaned into the mic. I've reviewed the materials provided by Representative Crockett. I take these allegations seriously. They demand full review, which I welcome. Crockett didn't blink. That said, Barrett continued, voice steely, the memo in question does not reflect any meeting I recall, nor any conversation I would ethically entertain. Crockett stood. Let's talk about what you don't recall, Justice, because it seems your memory is highly selective. Barrett frowned. Representative, save it. Crockett snapped. Because I have more. A new document dropped onto the projector. The screen lit up. This is a travel itinerary, Crockett said. Your hotel room reservation for the night before the supposed meeting, canceled at 10:12 p.m. Reason you never made the trip. Barrett tensed. So the meeting didn't happen, Crockett said coldly. Which begs the real question, why is your name in a fabricated memo tied to real officials with real power? Who forged this and who benefits from it? She didn't wait for an answer. Let's look closer. Slide changed. A web diagram appeared, crisscrossed with political PACs, legal funds, dark money groups. At the center, the name of the whistleblower. Arrows pointing to Barrett's memo. What we're seeing is not just an attack on one justice, Crockett said, pacing like a prosecutor. This is a strategic narrative war. Political groups creating evidence that looks real, smells real, until you open the metadata, and then it reeks. Gasps. Senator Hawley interrupted. Representative Crockett, this is conjecture. No, Senator. This is indictment, she shot back. By whom? By facts. Another document. This time a bank transfer. Let me introduce a $150,000 payment, Crockett said, pointing at the screen. to a consulting firm that, surprise, employed our mystery whistleblower just 2 months ago. A ripple of murmurs. Let's go deeper, she continued. This firm, funded by a 501c4 outfit that publicly campaigns for court reform. Their board includes a former staffer of Senator Cruz. The camera turned. Cruz froze. You want to talk collusion? This isn't about judicial ethics anymore. This is about political warfare disguised as oversight, Barrett interjected. I wasn't involved in that network. Crockett narrowed her gaze. But your name made it into their narrative, which makes you either complicit or a convenient pawn. Pick one. Barrett remained silent. Crockett turned to the committee. Let the record show that while a forged memo was waived as truth, real connections to political operatives were buried beneath layered nonprofits and PACs. Senator Blumenthal spoke for the first time. Do we have FBI cooperation on this yet? Already in process, Crockett replied. They've retrieved the original drive. Chain of custody begins with a courier hired by a shell company in Delaware. Senator Cruz barked, This hearing is becoming a circus. Crockett smiled thinly. If it is Senator, then you should feel right at home. Laughter. Cameras clicked faster. Let's bring it back, Crockett said. Because under the flash and outrage, something bigger is rotting beneath us. She stepped toward the dais. The Supreme Court isn't just about law. It's about perception, about legitimacy, and what happens when the public sees chaos, corruption cover-ups. She waited. They stop trusting. They stop obeying. And what remains is a robe with no authority. Justice Barrett spoke softly. I did not create this memo. No, Crockett replied, but you allowed its narrative to hang in the air without immediately crushing it. That silence, it screamed. Another beat. Crockett walked back to her desk. I move that the committee issue a bipartisan subpoena to the whistleblower and begin criminal referral procedures for document fraud and attempted judicial tampering. Senator Blumenthal nodded. Seconded. Chairman looked up. Motion carried. And just like that, the tables turned. The room didn't erupt. It inhaled. Then the news broke. CNN banner flashed. Jasmine Crockett unmasks. Judicial sabotage. Fox News. Barrett under fire as Crockett swoops in, trending on X. Crockett crushes. Memo gate. Barrett briefed. Outside the hearing room, protesters and reporters buzzed. Inside, silence settled like dust. Crockett didn't gloat. She didn't smirk. She packed her documents, turned off her mic, and whispered to her aide, that was just the opening argument. The rest of Washington had no idea what was coming. The Capitol's press gallery exploded before Barrett even left the building. Media vans formed a siege line around the Senate wing. Microphones were thrust in every direction, but the only name on anyone's lips was Jasmine Crockett. Inside the Judiciary Committee, the tension wasn't fading. It was metastasizing. Senator Hawley leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, trying to reframe. Let's not let theatrics override evidence, he muttered to a staffer, but the camera caught it. Within minutes, his words were clipped, captioned, and mocked. Meanwhile, Barrett sat in the back room, flanked by her legal team. Her hands were folded, but her knuckles were pale. The screen before her replayed her own image, silent, cornered on the defensive. Damage Control 1 aide whispered. Barrett shook her head. No, not yet. Back in the hearing chamber, the committee reconvened. Crockett returned to the microphone. Before we proceed with subpoenas, let me make something absolutely clear to the American people watching. This isn't a witch hunt. This is a reckoning. She pulled up a new graphic 8 justices. We've built a court system on the premise that it is immune to influence. That illusion shattered today. Her voice sharpened, and if Justice Barrett or anyone in this room believes this is the end of the conversation, they're in for a rude awakening. Senator Durbin adjusted his glasses. Representative Crockett, the floor yields to your witness presentation. Crockett nodded. A tall woman entered, mid-40s, brown hair, stiff posture. She walked to the table under the pseudonym Witness 1. Her real name was classified for now. Crockett began. You were employed at the Department of Justice in 2020. Yes. Were you present during a meeting involving then Justice nominee Barrett and White House legal officials? I was in the outer chamber. I saw the participants enter. I heard fragments of discussion from an adjoining room. Do you recognize this document? She nodded. It matches notes I typed up that evening. Do you recall Barrett's voice? Yes. Was she expressing concerns about the political optics of certain decisions? She was concerned about backlash. That's what I heard. Gasps again. Barrett was watching from the green room. She whispered, "This is fantasy." But inside the chamber, the narrative was shifting again. A second voice joined the record. Witness 1 continued. I didn't come forward until recently because I was scared. But after watching the decisions in Dobbs and others, I couldn't live with my silence. Crockett leaned in. And to be clear, you have signed a sworn affidavit affirming these claims, under penalty of perjury, yes. Crockett turned to the committee. We are no longer dealing with a hypothetical. Barrett's legal team rushed to respond. They pushed a rebuttal document forward. The chairman permitted it. Barrett's lead counsel approached the microphone. The supposed meeting described could not have occurred. Justice Barrett was in South Bend. We've submitted records, time logs, and security footage. Crockett responded instantly. Yet our witness recalls her voice from 10 feet away on the other side of a chamber wall. So someone is either lying or being used. And either answer still implicates this court in the worst judicial scandal in recent memory. Barrett stood. She requested to speak again. Permission granted, said the chairman. Barrett faced the committee. I have never at any point offered assurances to any party on any legal matter that would come before this court. I swore an oath. I lived that oath. Crockett fired back. And yet your name is in memos on emails in a witness statement. That's not speculation. That's circumstantial evidence, and in any courtroom in America that gets a case to trial. The room bristled. Senator Blumenthal spoke. We need to broaden this investigation to include any coordinated political effort to manipulate the judiciary. Crockett nodded. It's not just about Barrett. It's about the system that allowed this kind of narrative to seem plausible. Barrett looked down. The weight of implication was heavier than any verdict. News continued to spiral. New York Times released a leak, an internal email from a conservative legal advocacy group advising members to strategically pressure confirmation commitments from nominees while avoiding written trails. The court's credibility was bleeding out in real time. Meanwhile, Crockett's staff had been compiling digital trails, Twitter likes, LinkedIn connections, Venmo payments, all linking the whistleblower to activist accounts and political operatives tied to Barrett's elevation. The picture forming was ugly, a pseudo-grassroots smear campaign launched by well-funded actors, and somehow Barrett was its unintentional epicenter or its reluctant participant. Outside, protesters clashed. Some held signs reading "No deals" behind the bench. Others waved Barrett's photo with "framed" stamped over it in red. Inside, the committee's final act of the day loomed. Senator Durbin called the roll. On the motion to refer the whistleblower and relevant parties to the Department of Justice for potential charges, all in favor, aye. 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 Only Hawley and Cruz dissented. Motion passed. Crockett leaned back, exhausted but composed. Her final words of the day cut cleanly through the room. This was never about one woman. This is about reminding every justice, every senator, and every lobbyist who thinks they can write law from behind the curtain we see you. Barrett left the building quietly, but nothing was quiet anymore. The next morning, Capitol Hill was no longer a courthouse. It was a battlefield. Barricades had gone up overnight. Protesters lined the gates with chants that alternated between outrage and support, but all eyes were still fixed on Jasmine Crockett. At 9:00 a.m., Crockett strode into the committee room, flanked by 2 aides and a fresh binder. The crowd of journalists surged forward. She said nothing, just raised the binder in her hand like a declaration of war. Barrett was already inside waiting. Her legal team sat like statues. Chairman Durbin opened the session. We reconvened to continue examining the origins and implications of the documents presented by Representative Crockett. Crockett stood. Today we follow the money. The screens behind her lit up with a dizzying flowchart of corporations, legal firms, dark money PACs, and advocacy networks. At the center, the Judicial Leadership Roundtable, a think tank with ties to Barrett's pre-confirmation events. This, Crockett declared, is not a simple confirmation story. It is a spider web of influence, and it runs deeper than we thought. She walked to the screen. We start here, Judicial Leadership Roundtable, funded primarily through two anonymous shell foundations, Liberty Alliance and Forward Progress Fund. Combined over $70 million in undisclosed donations over 3 years. Senator Cruz interjected, "This isn't unusual. Think tanks accept donations." Crockett didn't look at him. It is when those donations are then funneled into nominee grooming programs, conferences, speaking fees, shadow briefings. A new slide appeared Barrett at a retreat. This image was taken during a closed-door seminar at the Miramar Estate, an exclusive event hosted by Liberty Alliance, the same group that financed the whistleblower's consulting firm. Barrett stirred visibly. "Justice Barrett, do you recall this event?" Crockett asked, flipping to a new page. "I have attended numerous conferences. Was this one of them?" Crockett snapped. Barrett paused. "Yes, but I wasn't aware of the funding." "That ignorance ends today," Crockett replied, "because every payment, every flight, every dinner, it's here." She thumped the binder on the table. Chairman Durbin gestured for the clerk to admit the binder into the record. "Justice Barrett may not have known at the time," Crockett continued, "but the people who surrounded her certainly did, and the whistleblower. Their email trail leads directly to Liberty's legal strategist, Marcus Halvern." She clicked to a new slide, a blurry email subject line, "Follow up on ACB commitment framework." Gasps. Barrett sat rigid. "What's the ACB commitment framework, Justice Barrett?" Crockett's tone was ice. "I have never agreed to a framework," Barrett answered. "Then why did this email go out 48 hours after your seminar appearance with your name in the subject line and 6 policy bullet points in the body text? I was not copied." "No, but you were quoted." Another document. A policy draft from Halvern with annotations. One read, "ACB comfortable with strict interpretation path on Commerce Clause. Advise confidentiality." Crockett didn't need to say more. Senator Durbin leaned in. "Is there any forensic confirmation these emails are authentic?" Crockett nodded. "The FBI confirms. Metadata intact. Servers verified." Barrett's lead attorney stood. "We object to the implication that casual event discussions constitute judicial promises." Crockett turned like a knife. "A casual conversation doesn't involve policy drafts and strategic frameworks. This wasn't lunch. This was planning." She took a breath. "And now let's talk about enforcement." The slide changed to a new figure, Robert Evington, a former deputy White House counsel. Evington coordinated the outreach to Barrett post-event. He has since joined Liberty Alliance's board. Emails show he described Barrett as reliable and aligned. Crockett flipped to another page. "Aligned with what? Aligned with who? This is not impartial justice. This is strategic placement." Barrett looked directly at Crockett. "I will not be vilified for attending an academic panel." Crockett's gaze did not waver. "You're being held accountable for what happened behind closed doors, not in lecture halls, in war rooms." Another document appeared. A calendar note from Evington Prep ACB on strategic ruling positions. Maintain discretion. Senator Blumenthal asked quietly, "Do we have sworn affidavits?" "Yes," Crockett replied. "From 2 Liberty Alliance employees, anonymous for now. Their statements describe pre-confirmation grooming sessions framed as philosophical alignment workshops." Murmurs filled the room. Crockett closed the binder. This is systemic. We are not talking about corruption in the form of envelopes or bribes. We are talking about ideological laundering, where justices are vetted like candidates, trained like operatives, and sent into the judiciary like missiles. Senator Durbin turned to Barrett. "Justice, we may require additional testimony." Barrett nodded once slowly. "I will cooperate." Crockett turned to the press cameras. "To the American people watching, this is not just a crisis. It's a blueprint of manipulation that we must dismantle piece by piece. This court must not be captured. Not now, not ever." And with that she stepped back. The hearings concluded at 6:42 p.m. A thick silence wrapped around the room, lingering even as the senators filed out. Justice Barrett remained seated, her hands folded but trembling slightly. The storm had passed, but its debris littered every corner of the Capitol. Outside, the crowd roared, divided and energized. Crockett stepped out first. Cameras blinded the walkway. Journalists screamed questions. She offered none of the usual pleasantries, just one phrase to every microphone: "Let the truth burn the shadows." Barrett exited next under heavy security. Her expression was unreadable, but her pace was swift. Her team surrounded her, but no amount of shielding could protect her from the tide now coming. That evening, the Judiciary Committee released its interim report. Among the findings, the whistleblower was confirmed to have fabricated key components of their testimony. However, connections between judicial grooming networks and undisclosed funding were undeniable. Forensic analysis revealed extensive metadata manipulation across multiple documents. The recommendation established an independent Judicial Ethics Council with oversight capabilities previously absent in Supreme Court operations. News anchors called it historic. In a primetime interview, Jasmine Crockett sat across from a national correspondent. "Congresswoman, were you trying to take down a justice?" "No," she replied, calm and direct. "I was trying to take down the illusion that our highest court is untouchable. Nobody in a democracy is beyond scrutiny." When asked what she thought of Barrett's testimony, Crockett paused. "I think she's a smart woman who got swept into something bigger than herself. But she didn't fight back hard enough. And that's the problem." Barrett, for her part, issued a written statement. "I remain committed to the Constitution and the integrity of the court. I welcome any efforts to improve transparency and ethical clarity for the institution I serve." But her tone, once commanding, now sounded like a concession. A week later, the Supreme Court announced a new internal protocol. All justices must disclose participation in third-party events with potential policy implications. It was a quiet but undeniable victory for Crockett. Behind the scenes, legislative offices buzzed with a new urgency. Bills were drafted. Oversight frameworks debated. Transparency no longer sounded like a partisan talking point. It had become a bipartisan imperative. Crockett returned to her district to a hero's welcome. Town halls were packed. Letters poured in. Young women lined up for hours just to thank her. One wrote, "You didn't just question a justice. You reminded us that power, even in robes, can be held accountable." 6 months later, Barrett authored the majority opinion in a landmark ruling. It ran counter to every position the forged documents had predicted. In a final footnote, she quoted, "Justice must not only be done, it must be seen to be done." The message was unmistakable. The system bent, it wavered, but it did not break, and it was Jasmine Crockett, armed with truth, grit, and fire, who had ensured that.